or may affect the national park, or actually an area of outstanding natural beauty for that matter, they have a statutory duty to consider those statutory purposes when they take a decision. So when they took a decision to express an interest in hosting a repository, this statutory duty applied. It also applies to the decision at the end of the month. And you may recall when Bill Jefferson kind of broke cover recently, mentioned that essentially the National Park Authority is supposed to police enforcement of this particular duty. So there is some legal teeth there, which, if needs be, we will bear. Now, I've mentioned areas of outstanding natural beauty. I want to emphasise that this duty also applies to our Solway area, which is very dear to my heart as well, and it applies there, and the same principles will apply. So to summarise, even good old NIREX, which got so much wrong, excluded national parks at the beginning of its search. There is this statutory duty. I'm not convinced some of the local authorities have done what I would like to have seen them do with regard to this duty, but we're going to make sure that they know about it by the end of the month. I believe it's their eternal shame that they haven't excluded the national park and that they've left 75% of the area under consideration, which is our own national park, which, quite frankly, I just can't forgive them for. As far as planning laws are concerned, well, we probably all know we live in the UK's tightest planning regime. Now, how ironic is that? And love them or hate them, our planning laws have largely done their job. They also underpin our property market. Many people buy properties in confidence in the Lake District that adverse development is incredibly unlikely. Indeed, most of us who have bought properties or businesses in the national park have paid a very significant premium for the privilege of doing so, and that's partially in reliance of such protection. So what is the legal bottom line? Well, as far as planning in the national parks are concerned, the fundamental principle of planning law relating to major developments in a national park is simple. It just can't happen unless all alternative sites have been exhausted. Indeed, the Managing Radioactive Waste Safety Report that we paid £3 or £4 million for actually says this. And that doesn't mean exhausting alternative sites in Cumbria. It means anywhere in the country. And as we know from NIREX's investigations, that there are vast tracts of eastern England, mainly, which are not environmentally sensitive, or in national parks, which are more geologically suitable. Recently, Mr. Ellis from the NDA, who's talking later on, when I've asked him about this point, he has, on more than one occasion, at least twice now, confirmed to me that in the event that a site in a national park is chosen, that it's understood and agreed that at that juncture, they would then essentially have to survey the rest of the country in order to look at all the alternative suitable sites. Now, the intelligent people in the room, who I suspect are 99.9%, will have reached the conclusion that the voluntarism model completely breaks down at that point. It just falls apart. And the same principles, by the way, apply to Solway area outstanding of natural beauty. Now, in other environmental protection, very briefly, because we're running a bit late, in the Lake District, we're fortunate. We have a number of special areas of conservation and sites of special scientific interest. We also have the area of outstanding natural beauty and the Ramsar site on the Solway. Ennerdale, which, by the way, contrary to Stephen's slide about what Professor Smythe has said, may be the intentions of our political masters, and in some ways for us in the rest of the Lake District, it would appear to be quite convenient to ditch Ennerdale. But I tell you something, I'm not going to allow them to change the national park boundaries and ditch Ennerdale just so it helps the rest of our brand. It's just not going to happen. Ennerdale Fell is a triple SI, the lake is a triple SI, and the sack that comes out, the River Ian, which comes out of the lake, is a sack for the reasons we explained in the film. Freshwater pearl mussels, England's only breeding population, purest water, Atlantic salmon, etc., etc. SACs are the best protected sites under European Union law. We could, as a country, change other laws, potentially, but as long as we're in the EU, we can't change those. And by the way, we did ask Ennerdale, a few people said, well, what about changing it? We've had an assurance from Mr. Ellis that the NDA will not be changing any environmental or planning laws to facilitate a repository. I believe him, I think. Anyway, if a plan adversely affects the SAC, there are exceptions when it can proceed. There has to be an overriding public interest. Well, we might have that here, maybe. But also, there has to be no alternative sites. Well, we know about that, because we've just been talking about that. We know there are alternative sites elsewhere in the country. So at that point, any repository plan which adversely affected a SAC, and believe you me, if Stephen's projections for Ennerdale are anything like accurate, and they are based on the NDA's own kind of assessments and reports, then believe you me, our Ennerdale SAC, for instance, will be completely knackered, to use a technical term, and it would find its way to the European Court, I can assure you, if anybody tried to do anything to that SAC. Because I've made bloody sure it did, to be perfectly frank with you. Now, I'm really annoyed, as you might have gathered at one or two junctures. I don't know why I'm standing here, really. We've got all these people, there's some of them on here. Some of them we actually pay their wages to look after our national park. Some of them are supposed to represent our tourism industry. And I've got to say this, our MP, the Right Honourable Jamie Reid, as readers of the Keswick Reminder will recall, apparently believes the Lake District brand will be enhanced by a repository under the national park. Now, seriously, assuming the Keswick Reminder got it right, Vic, I assume you did you think? Yeah, he did apparently say that, yeah. Purposes, how can we reconcile a repository with them, a bit worried about this. Well, quite frankly, they should have said something during the bloody consultation. Because he's right, he's absolutely bloody right. The National Trust, I'm proud to say, was founded by a guy who was vicar just over here, Canon Hardwick, Drummond Rawnsley. He and 3 others founded the National Trust. And thanks to his foresight, and people like Beatrix Potter, the National Trust now owns 25% of the Lake District. And this includes the key site, which is apparently in the frame, crazy though it sounds, on Ennerdale Fell. Now you may know that the National Trust property is inalienable, but that means it can't be compulsory purchased. That could be a bit of a problem, actually. But hey, we'll just carry on with the process. What does it matter? What does it matter? The National Trust view, however, could be very critical. Seriously, if the plan proceeds, if we get beyond the end of this month and our councils decide to go further, then obviously everybody in this room is going to have to step up to the plate, and we're going to have to get properly organised. And we're going to have to say to people like the National Trust, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? Well, we don't know it's going to affect our land. Sorry, you own 25% of the Lake District National Park, and 75% of the area under consideration is in the Lake District National Park, and you're not sure it's going to affect any of your land? It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. At some point, between now and the end of the month, I hope the National Trust do what they should do. And I can stand here and say categorically that if Canon Rawnsley were alive today, he'd be up here on this stage now, and he'd be saying to people in the National Trust, not in my name, what are you doing, is what he would be saying. I'm absolutely convinced of that. Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, involved in IRX? Where are they?
Here.
You know what I'm going to say? There is support on a national level, that's local, and you know, we need some serious clout. We're going to have to, if we lose at the end of the month, we're going to have to get organised, and we can't do this on the back of a fag packet, which is what we've been doing. I am going to say something about Friends of the Lake District. They've got no, as far as I'm concerned, they have no concerns about upsetting people. Well, I haven't heard a dicky bird from Friends of the Lake District publicly. They seem to be more concerned about the zip wire again. We're told that they're going to make a statement. We're hoping it's going to be before February. But I wouldn't bet on it.
Friends of the Lake District are in the room because I work for them, and our position did say to the council during the consultation, you should not go to stage 4. We're back.
Moreover, the Friends of the Council considered a statement by the 30th of January.
Good. Good. Yeah, you know, when you're actually conducting essentially what is now a political campaign, it might be an idea to make a statement the day before a decision is made. Anyway, there's another guy that I've come across recently, and you may have heard of him, and you can see his views on silence of our friends. We'll remember the words of our enemies as well, though, not just the silence of our friends. Is it worth fighting for? Yes, it is. And seriously, if we lose at the end of January and our councils proceed, all of us are going to have to get off our proverbials and do something about this to make sure that this doesn't happen in our national park. Because believe you me, this is a scandal born of political expediency. And it's you and me who are in the frame now. But despite what I've been talking about, legal, environmental, blah, 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 do you know what? It's actually very, very simple. The Lake District National Park is simply no place for nuclear waste.
Yeah.
It's Lakeland, not wasteland. Thank you.